my thermostat dropped to 62 degrees. One photo later, my entire marriage fell apart. There is a specific kind of silence in the sleeper cab of a Freightliner at 2 in the morning. It isn't actually quiet. There is the relentless hum of the diesel engine, the vibration of the tires against the asphalt, and the wind howling across the plains of Wyoming. But inside your head, when you are 1,000 miles from home with nothing but the dashed white lines for company, the silence is absolute. It is a space where you trust the life you built is waiting securely at the end of the route. I had spent 15 years as a long-haul trucker, sacrificing sleep, holidays, and countless weekends to afford a piece of the American dream. I owned a beautiful 4-bedroom brick home in Katy, Texas, purchased 3 years before I ever met my wife, Sarah. I paid the mortgage, I paid the bills, and I drove through blizzards so she could pursue her passion for freelance photography without the pressure of a steady paycheck. I was somewhere on Interstate 80, the snow beginning to stick to the windshield, when the notification chimed on my dashboard-mounted phone. I glanced over, expecting a message from my dispatcher. Instead, it was an alert from the Nest Smart Home app. Hallway thermostat manually adjusted to 62 degrees Fahrenheit. My hands tightened instinctively on the heavy steering wheel. Sarah was a woman who was fundamentally incompatible with anything below 74 degrees. She wore thick wool socks in August. She kept a heated blanket draped over the living room sofa year-round. If the air conditioning was set to 62 degrees in the middle of a mild Texas October, something was drastically wrong. My immediate thought was a broken window. Maybe a break-in. Adrenaline spiked in my chest, sharp and cold. I tapped the phone screen to check the other sensors, but the security cameras I had installed over the garage and back patio had been conveniently listed as offline. I didn't call Sarah. If she was in danger, a ringing phone could make it worse. Instead, I pulled the 18-wheeler onto the shoulder of an empty exit ramp, the air brakes hissing loudly in the freezing night. I picked up my phone and called Tom. Tom was a retired Marine who lived next door, a man who kept a meticulous lawn and missed absolutely nothing that happened on our quiet cul-de-sac. He answered on the second ring, his voice raspy with sleep. I apologized for waking him and asked if he could look out his window to see if my front door was kicked in, explaining the strange temperature drop. "Hold on, Elias," Tom muttered. I heard the rustle of blinds being pulled back. Then, a long, heavy pause. "Elias. Your house isn't broken into. But your driveway is packed. Sarah's car is there, her parents' SUV is parked on the curb, and there's a black Silverado I've never seen before blocking the mailbox. Every light on the first floor is blazing." Confusion temporarily paralyzed me. Are they having a party? At 2 in the morning? "Let me put my boots on," Tom said, his tone shifting from sleepy to tactical. "I'm going to walk the perimeter. Give me 3 minutes." Those 3 minutes sitting in the freezing cab of my truck felt like a decade. The heater was blasting, but I was shivering. My phone buzzed with 3 incoming text messages. They were photos from Tom, taken from the dark side yard, peering through the sheer curtains of my dining room window. I zoomed in on the first picture, and the world as I knew it simply stopped spinning. The dining room was decorated with silver and gold balloons. Strung across the mantel of the fireplace I had built by hand, was a massive, custom-printed banner. It read, "Welcome to our new home. Congratulations, Sarah and Greg." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. I swiped to the next photo. There was Sarah, my wife, wearing a beautiful emerald dress I had never seen before. She was holding a champagne flute, laughing brightly. Standing behind her, with his arms wrapped possessively around her waist, was a tall man in a tailored button-down shirt. Greg, presumably. But it was the third photo that truly broke something inside me. It was a shot of Sarah's father, Richard, clinking his glass against Greg's. Her mother, Helen, was beaming beside them, holding a plate of appetizers. These were the people I had hosted for Thanksgiving. This was the father-in-law I had loaned $5,000 to last year when his roof leaked, a debt he never repaid. They were all standing in my house, eating my food, drinking my liquor, and celebrating the transition of my home to my wife's new fiancé. The thermostat hadn't been lowered because of a broken window. It had been lowered because there were 20 people packed into my living room, generating heat while they celebrated my erasure. "Elias," Tom texted a second later. Tell me what you want me to do. Give the word and I'll walk through that front door right now. There is a moment when catastrophic betrayal hits you, where you have a choice. You can let the anger explode, driving you to scream, threaten, and burn your life to the ground. Or you can freeze the anger into something hard, sharp, and infinitely more dangerous. 20 years on the road had taught me how to handle emergencies. You don't jerk the steering wheel when a tire blows, you hold it steady, you gear down, and you bring the massive machine to a controlled, devastating halt. Do nothing, Tom, I typed back. Go back to sleep. Thank you. I sat in the dark for 10 minutes, listening to the wind hit the side of the trailer. Then, I dialed Sarah's number. She answered surprisingly fast, the background noise completely silent. She must have stepped into the master bathroom and locked the door to take the call. Hey babe, she whispered, her voice layered with a flawless, sleepy sweetness. You're up late. Rough weather in Wyoming, I kept my voice steady, my tone completely flat. Just pulled over for the night. Did I wake you? Yeah, just a little, she sighed, a perfect performance of a tired, devoted wife. I was just dreaming about you. It's so cold here tonight, I'm wrapped in that ugly fleece blanket you hate. The sociopathic ease of the lie made my stomach turn. She was standing mere feet away from a man she was supposedly marrying, in a house I paid for, surrounded by her complicit family, and she didn't miss a single beat. Well, turn the heat up, I said softly. I want you to be comfortable. I love you. I love you too, Elias. Drive safe tomorrow. She hung up. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat, put the truck in gear, and merged back onto the icy highway. I didn't drive toward my next drop. I drove toward the nearest truck stop in Cheyenne, parked the rig, and waited for the sun to rise. At 8 a.m. Central Time, I called John Hayes. John was a ruthless, highly efficient family law attorney in Houston whom another driver had recommended years ago. When I explained the situation, detailing the photos, the banner, and the presence of her family, John didn't express pity. He expressed tactical approval of my silence. You have a massive advantage, Elias, John said, his voice crackling over the Bluetooth connection. In Texas, property acquired before marriage is separate property. That house is yours. She is legally a tenant, but this Greg character and her parents are unauthorized occupants. Trespassers. We are going to hit them with a shock and awe campaign they will never recover from. I want them out, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I don't want a screaming match. I want it legal, binding, and absolute. Here is the playbook, John replied. I am filing the petition for divorce electronically this morning. Along with it, I am filing an ex parte temporary restraining order, arguing that she is committing fraud, dissipating marital assets, and allowing unauthorized individuals to reside in your separate property. Which creates a liability risk. A judge will sign it by tomorrow. Furthermore, I am drafting a formal notice to vacate for her guests. You drive back to Texas. Do not call her. Do not text her. When you arrive, you won't be alone. It took me 2 grueling days to bobtail the truck back to the company terminal in Houston. For 48 hours, I lived a double life. I answered Sarah's occasional texts with mundane updates about way stations and diesel prices. She sent me a picture of our dog sitting on the front porch, adding a heart emoji. I looked closely at the background of the photo and noticed a man's work boots by the door. The audacity was breathtaking. She believed I was stupid, blind, and permanently relegated to the role of her financial provider while she built a new life over the bones of my hard work. On Saturday morning, the Texas heat was already pressing down like a wet towel. I parked my personal pickup truck 3 blocks away from my house on Elm Creek Drive. I sat on the tailgate, drinking a black coffee, waiting. At exactly 9 a.m., a white SUV with the Harris County Constable's seal pulled up beside me. A tall, broad-shouldered deputy stepped out, adjusting his duty belt. John Hayes had arranged for civil standby in service of process. Mr. Elias, the deputy asked, checking his clipboard. I have a stack of paperwork here. Divorce petition, temporary restraining order granting you exclusive use of the residence, and criminal trespass warnings for 3 individuals currently inside. You ready? More than I've ever been, I said. We walked down the sidewalk together. The neighborhood was quiet, the sprinklers ticking rhythmically on the manicured lawns. Greg's black Silverado was still parked in my driveway, right where my truck usually sat. I walked up the concrete steps to my front porch, pulled my keys from my pocket, and slid the brass key into the deadbolt. The lock clicked heavily. I pushed the door open. The smell of bacon, eggs, and my premium dark roast coffee filled the air. Laughter drifted from the kitchen. I stepped into the foyer, the deputy right behind me. "Sarah, did you remember to take the trash out?" a man's voice called from the kitchen. Greg walked into the hallway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was wearing my gray sweatpants. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes darting from my face to the uniformed officer behind me. "Who the hell are you?" Greg demanded, trying to sound authoritative. Before I could answer, Sarah stepped out from the kitchen. She was wearing my bathrobe, holding a spatula. When she saw me, her face didn't just pale, the color completely vanished, leaving her looking like a ghost. Her mouth opened, but her vocal cords refused to work. A second later, her father, Richard, walked out of the living room, holding a mug of coffee. The mug slipped from his hand, shattering against the hardwood floor, dark liquid pooling around his socks. "Elias," Sarah finally choked out, her voice trembling so violently it cracked. "What? What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Wyoming." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I simply looked at her, truly seeing the stranger she was beneath the familiar face. "The Nest thermostat notified me that the temperature dropped, Sarah. I thought a window was broken. Turns out, it was just my marriage." I turned my attention to Greg, who was now backing away slowly. "I am Elias. This is my house. These are my sweatpants you are wearing. And this officer is here for you." The deputy stepped forward, handing a thick stack of papers to Sarah, who took them with trembling hands. "Ma'am, you have been served. And as for you gentlemen," the deputy turned to Greg and Richard, handing them separate documents. "These are criminal trespass warnings. You have exactly 20 minutes to gather your personal belongings and vacate this property. If you are still on these premises at 9:25 a.m., you will leave in handcuffs." "Now wait a damn minute," Richard stammered, his face flushing red. "You can't just throw us out into the street. Sarah lives here." "Sarah is legally a tenant in a separate property home facing an emergency eviction order due to asset dissipation," I said, repeating John's words perfectly. I looked my father-in-law dead in the eyes. "And you, Richard, are a fraud who drank my bourbon while helping your daughter steal my life. 20 minutes. The panic that ensued was absolute chaos, but to me, it played out in profound, satisfying silence. Greg scrambled upstairs to throw his clothes into duffel bags, his tough guy facade completely dissolved. Sarah's mother emerged from the guest room, crying hysterically as she tried to pack her suitcase. Sarah stood in the center of the hallway, sobbing, trying to grab my arm, begging for a chance to explain. I simply stepped back, keeping a physical distance between us, letting the silence be my only answer. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but true justice isn't about revenge. It is about the surgical removal of toxic people from your life. At exactly 9:24 a.m., Greg's Silverado backed out of my driveway, followed closely by her parents' SUV. Sarah sat on the front curb, surrounded by 3 suitcases, waiting for an Uber, reading the divorce petition through a veil of tears. I walked back inside, closed the heavy front door, and locked the deadbolt. The house was a mess of half-packed boxes and spilled coffee, but for the first time in years, the air inside felt clean. I walked over to the hallway wall, tapped the Nest thermostat, and set the temperature to a crisp, freezing 60 degrees. Then, I sat down in my favorite chair and finally allowed myself to breathe.
Your team has destroyed a tower. Victory!